Welcome to the Avert Your Eyes Podcast, where we talk with some of the most creative people within North Texas and beyond. I'm your host, Michael Gibson Jr. If you are a pet parent, then listen up. This episode's guest is Jenny Clifton. I met her several years ago while we were studying and performing improv in Fort Worth. She's recently created an app called the Pet Health Diary, which allows pet owners to effectively partner with their vet to provide the best care for their animal. You can create a detailed, customized health record for your pet, track symptoms and medication dosage, and easily share details with your vet or pet sitter. The app is free, and as of posting this episode, it is only currently available on the iOS App Store, but fear not if you have an Android device. Things are in the works for you. We discuss her new app, her love of Dallas. We reminisce about some of the technologies we grew up with, and the importance of trying new things, and her adventures visiting Germany where she was born, and much more on episode number 14 of the Avert Your Eyes Podcast. Consider yourself warned. Have you always lived in Dallas?
No.
Where are you from?
Atlanta. I moved here in 2005. Yeah, 2000. I can't believe it's been 11 years because when I got here, I hated it. And I'd been trying to leave ever since. And so for the longest time, when I crept up on the 10-year mark, I was like, I'm just going to pretend that wasn't real. See if I could make it not be a thing. And no, it's a thing. It's real. But after I was trying to go to Chicago because I wanted to study improv at Second City and, et cetera, et cetera. You know why. Right. You know why anybody goes to Chicago if they've ever taken an improv class. So I had paid off all my debt. I had put a ton of money in the bank because I knew I was going to have to pay for the move, and I didn't want to have to drive a U-Haul from here to Chicago. Right. So I had money to pay movers, and I had all these plans in place, and I started looking for jobs. And my sister calls me one day. They used to live in New York. And she calls me one day and she says, "We're coming to Texas." And I was like, son of a... And so I said, okay. And I just kept looking for work, and I was having a hard time finding jobs and getting interviews. And I even went to Chicago for one interview, and it didn't go well. And a position had opened up within my company, which was probably a kind of a no-brainer that I was going to get the job. So I decided I would see what the offer was, and that was going to be the sign. Yeah. The yes or the no sign. And the offer was terrible. And I said no. I said thank you, but that's not enough. And so I then that was it. I said, all right, I'm staying. So now I'm here, and it started to grow on me since then. But I will tell you that Oak Cliff is what I like. I never felt at home in Lakewood. Deep Ellum was still in transition, and they were building the dart rail, so everything was always dirty. Everything was always covered in this fine black, from that construction. But once I got to Oak Cliff, I was like, okay, now this is good. So now I'm home in Oak Cliff.
What's your favorite part about Oak Cliff?
That on any given day, within, 2 miles, I have the choice of, I'm going to guess conservatively, 100 different taquerias that I could go to get a taco. So
what Trump was dreading is already here.
Yeah. They're worried about taco trucks on every corner. We've already got that. We're like, it's just another day in the hood. Right. Yeah, no, but this neighborhood there's something vital and eclectic, and I like the fact that it's diverse, and I like the fact that there's this place up by the Home Depot that I read about that it's a Mexican restaurant, and they serve, one of the dishes has crickets in it. And I'm like, okay, yeah. Have you tried it? No, but because it's weird to me. It doesn't make sense, right? It's a cricket, it's a bug, but other people eat it. Yeah. So, this notion of what we should and shouldn't eat is a bit arbitrary based on your culture. So it's one of my goals is to go and try this thing, because the reviews of it are fantastic. They say if you can get past the fact that it's crickets, the food, the flavor it's nutty, almondy. So
that's what I've heard. I used to work with a guy that was from the Congo, and he said it was the same sort of thing. Like, he grew up there. Like, I can't remember the name of the dish, but it was basically crickets, and his mom made it and set it down there. And he was like, what's that? And she told him, and he's like, I can't eat that. Like that's disgusting. And she's like, no, baby, it's very delicious, and set it out. And, after a while, he got hungry and he tried a little bit, and he was like, he was like, I have to tell you, it's actually very good.
Yeah. Well, so I want to try it. I like the idea of that, within reason.
Yes.
Because I've never felt the need, I don't anticipate feeling the need to ever jump out of an airplane. But within reason, like trying new things, it changes my perspective on things. A friend of mine and I went to Germany in 2015. And we considered, I guess I shouldn't speak for my friend, but I consider myself very aware and willing and open. And I thought we are going to be the antithesis of the ugly American when we get over there. But the funny thing about it is that in some ways we were. Like, we knew how to figure out how to get ourselves around on the public transportation. We weren't walking around with, our phones, because nobody uses maps anymore. But we did our best to sort of assimilate very quickly and fit in and keep an eye on what locals were doing to understand, where to go and what to try and things like that. But there were a couple of things that we couldn't escape. And one of the things was that we were always the loudest person in the room, no matter what. And we were just having a regular conversation, but when we would laugh out loud. And we even watched families with kids when they would be goofing around and their children would laugh so quietly. And we were like, oh my God, we are so loud. That was the case everywhere we went. We were the loudest people, not even trying to be. And then I got a headache and I needed to have Tylenol. So we had this whole big thing where the drugs are not actually sold in the drugstore. The drugs are sold in the pharmacy, and then the drugstore is everything but the drugs. Like, if you took the pharmacy out of the CVS, that's what they call the drugstore. And then the pharmacy has the drugs. And I guess they had a few other things, but it was mostly just the drugs. So we went to this pharmacy, and it was in a building that was like 800 years old, which, I mean, how cool is that, right?
Yes.
So we asked the guy for Tylenol, and no, Tylenol. So here's our Americo-centric thinking. Tylenol must be a world-known brand. Everybody knows Tylenol. Nope. So then I'm like, ooh, I'm so clever. Acetaminophen, thinking the name of a drug is the name of a drug. No, that's the name of the drug in America, maybe Canada. In Germany, it's called paracetamol. And so it took us a minute to figure out what we wanted. And when he hands me this little box of paracetamol, and I look at it, and I was just like, what? I didn't recognize the word because I was surprised that the name of the drug wasn't the name of the drug.
Yeah.
And so I showed it to my friend who's a nurse. And then as I look back up at the pharmacist, he's got this look on his face like, ugly Americans. And we didn't mean to. I was just confused. Yeah. So, FYI, Tylenol in Germany is paracetamol or something like
that. Good tip to know.
Yeah.
What was your favorite thing about traveling in Germany?
I really liked being able to go everywhere on the train or the bus, and the public transportation, and the fact that it was really a big part of the community, which actually there's so many things that speaks to this notion of community, that's different than our notion of community here. And this whole, with America, we're the greatest country in the world and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, that's fine. Maybe in all of German TV, they're always saying we're the greatest country in the world. Maybe every country says that. I don't know. But this notion of that for the good of the citizenry, we are going to put into place a means by which everyone can get around. Yeah. To me, that kind of thing is, that speaks to how the citizens are considered. You know what I mean? We made a connection with a local who lives in Nuremberg, which is the town I was born in. That was part of the trip, was to go back to my place of my birth. And he told us an awful lot about we kind of talked about the differences in that sort of thing. Like how do communities behave as communities? And there's less of a every man for himself sort of feeling, than there is here. And it doesn't mean that everyone is shackled to the same it's not the communist socialist horror that people would have you believe it was. It was just that there was the communally accepted idea that things that benefited the citizens, like public transportation and access to healthcare and the help if somebody is in in a financial lack and things like that. There was all these things that the community had come together to decide was good for the community and everybody. Well, and I say that, I don't know, we didn't poll every German, but, it just seemed like that this was like the society, the culture was about that this was appropriate and well, money well spent.
Yeah.
So that was something that I was just really struck by that, because I'm a huge, it takes a village kind of thing. And so I don't know, I really, and also they've got a bunch of, as you can imagine, we were in Berlin for part of the trip and then in southern Germany for the rest. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of World War II era things. Like we stumbled upon the Berlin Wall at some point. There's just chunks of the wall up all over the city.
Yeah.
But everything that was, there were a lot of monuments and museums and that kind of documented this part of the history. And there was this one thing, a site, I guess, that was called Monument to the Murdered Jews. I mean, I was like, there was no spin, there was no coding, there was no lightening of what it was. It was the monument to the murdered Jews. And the fact that they were just so straightforward with the description of what this was about, that was also really interesting to see that they were not shying from their history and they weren't trying to change it because it was painful or embarrassing or difficult.
Yeah.
So those were my 3 favorite things about Germany. You only asked for one.
No, absolutely. Yeah, whatever, the more the merrier. I saw a piece of Berlin Wall. They have it, can't remember the name of the hotel, but there's a lot of Asian art in that particular hotel. I don't want to say the name in case I get it wrong, but I was there for I know they have all this Asian culture there at this hotel, but I was there for a banquet and I happened to run to the restroom or something, and coming back out the doors, like it's right there next to these doors, and just shocking was how tall the wall actually was. Mm-hmm. Was insane. Yeah,
and how it just literally was in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
And that at some point they drew a line, they built a wall.
And separated families from...
that was another thing that was completely extraordinary. Of course, now the two sides look really different. Look, it's all the same. It's just every now and then there's this wall that interrupts your view that reminds you this used to be the case. But I'm sure back then it was a huge difference. And my mother was actually, I was born in Germany, and they were living in Nuremberg. We were on an army base, but so they got to travel all over Europe during the time. And my mom had to go through the wall at some point in Berlin. They went on a trip to Berlin. I guess Checkpoint Charlie, that's the famous, where that was an American checkpoint that on one side was, I guess, a army installation or a base or something like that. And there was one point she got questioned because I wasn't with her, but I was in her passport as an infant. And so there was questions about, where was the baby? And was she trying to traffic a baby across the, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know the whole story, but it just baffles me, this notion.
Yeah.
But the good thing about it is that what Germany proved is that walls work. No. No.
No, not at all. For those of you that don't know your history, the wall eventually came down. I'm trying not to make this podcast a political podcast.
Oh, right.
I know we're joking, but it's...
Yeah, that was sarcasm.
Absolutely. It's just weird how history does tend to repeat itself.
Yeah.
In certain instances, certain cases.
Yeah.
So weird. Anyway, digressing from that.
Right.
Where did you end up going to school?
What, college?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I had a couple of things. Because we moved around a lot when I was a kid. And I started college in Norman at the University of Oklahoma. I was there for 2 years, and my grades were terrible, and so I was asked to leave or something. I don't know. That's how I remember it. I'm sure it was just something. I'm sure it was just academic probation or something. Anyway, so I dropped out of school after 2 years, and then my family was in kind of an upheaval at that time. My parents were about to get divorced. I didn't know that yet, but that was about to happen, and then I was kind of seeking this grounding, and I had it in my head that if I could just get through school, then that would be, that was the next thing. And so after a couple of trials and errors, I ended up in Atlanta. My grandparents were living there. That's where my mom grew up. That's where she went to high school. And so I moved in with my grandparents at the age of 20 and enrolled at Georgia State, which is in downtown Atlanta.
Okay.
And at the time, when it started, I think that it was really just a business and law school for night students.
Yeah.
And what it ended up with, when I was there, it had one of the biggest student populations of commuters, and the median age was much higher than an average college. And of course, by the time I was there, I was older than your average student. So it was really fun. And I eventually moved out from my grandparents and ended up living in the hood in Atlanta, because that's always where I could afford, and it never bothered me to live in. I don't know. I've always liked. We lived in the suburbs when I was a kid, and we were always in good shape. We always had nice neighborhoods and all that kind of stuff. But I just love being in the city, and so I lived close to school so that I could, because that was where I was going, and so I lived in South Atlanta and went to Georgia State.
What'd you major in?
I had many majors over the course of my years, and I ended up with a ton of credit hours because I kept changing majors and had to go down like another road.
Yeah.
But I ended up with a Bachelor of Fine Art in Studio Art with a concentration in photography and an automatic minor in art history. And then I double minored in sociology because I really dug that. When I took one of those classes as an elective, and it just lit me on fire, and so I ended up taking all the sociology classes I could take.
What was it that drew you to art?
That's a really good question. I don't even remember how that happened, because when I started at OU, I was going to be a doctor. And then I had applied for and won a chemical engineering scholarship. It wasn't a big one. It was a small one.
But still.
I know. Yeah. And that's so crazy to me, because chemical engineering, there is nothing about that I have the aptitude or the interest or anything. And I don't know how that happened. So I got this little scholarship, and I enrolled in the chemical engineering class, which was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7:30 a.m. on the far side of the campus. So I dropped that class because it was inconvenient to take that class. And then I changed my major to, I guess, pre-med, and then a vertebrate anatomy class killed that dream, because by the end of the semester, everything I owned smelled like that embalming fluid.
Yeah, formaldehyde.
Formaldehyde, yeah. Everything I owned smelled like and I couldn't get the smell out of my nose, and I just was like, I can't do this anymore. So, because we were dissecting a mink. That was the vertebrate. That's what happens after they take in the 80s, that's what happened, is when they would take their fur for the coats, and then they would, some of the animals, maybe not all, but some of them would get funneled to schools to study the anatomy of a mammal. So.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I dropped that, and then changed to math. I know, it's so dumb, because I was good at math. But what I didn't understand at the time was I was good at math up to algebra, maybe trig and geometry. I consider all those kind of on the same kind of parallel. And then above algebra is calculus and everything that's hard. And so I had to stop that major because I couldn't do the math, literally. And then that's when I dropped out. And then I don't know, my first camera was actually a little 110 camera, and it was Kodak had a ad campaign that I remember that was called Open Me First. And it was at Christmas, and that was the thing. They wanted the present that should be opened first is the camera, so you can take pictures of opening all the presents, right? And so one year, and I'm sure that this was in the late 70s, early 80s, a little 110 camera. And that was my first camera. And then when I was in junior high or high school, my dad got me a Nikon FA, which only if you're an older Nikon user will that mean anything to you, but it was a beautiful camera. And so I always just took pictures. And then I think it came out of that, well, you know, because I changed to math major because somebody said, you're good at math. I said, I am good at math. I should go take math. You know, and so I think that's how it ended up. But then I got into it and I found it really wonderful. I actually had taken some classes in another, like a for-profit school that was really more about business of these artistic, like the arts, which I put an asterisk on the end because that's rude. That's arrogant. But it's a different way to take this creative, you know, medium and go do a thing with it. Yeah. And I didn't want to do that thing. So I decided I'd go to Georgia State. It was also cheaper. And that's when I got into the art of it. And I started, art school's amazing. And I think everybody should go to art school for a little while because of the way it changed how I look at things. It opened my mind to considering things in a different way. You know, like getting to how we interpret the world all the time, right? And that's the thing about art. You look at art and what you get from it is what you get from it. The guy next to you may get something different from it. Absolutely. But that's kind of the magic of it, right? And so, but I loved the way that it gave me the opportunity to interpret the world in that way. So, also we got to play and paint, and there was one semester that I took pottery wheel throwing, you know, like in Ghost.
Ghost, yes.
Right. And so, this was in the 90s. And so this was where we would, the cutoff jeans and then layered with either leggings or, thermal underwear. Yeah. And Keds or Doc Martens and flannel, you know, it was grunge, all that. And so I spent that whole term like brown from the waist down from the, from the dust, from the pottery, from the clay. It was fun. So I was dirty all the time. It was a blast. It was great.
That's awesome. Yeah. You ended up going to art school. I went to the University of North Texas. And I was telling you this earlier, how like I would have loved to have taken a photography class while I was up there, but they wouldn't let us because I was on the radio, television, and film track, mainly the film track, and art and film were two totally separate things, and I wish there was more of a collusion between the two, mm-hmm. because they can go hand in hand. Yeah,
I can see that.
Yeah.
I never was able to understand the notion of I can snatch that moment out of midair, and I have a particular eye or point of view, as they say. But I have a particular eye, but I'm really good about snatching that moment out of midair. But the notion of putting together all these moments to create it, it's like, I'm not saying I'm not capable of it, but it baffles me. But I know that there are people that can bridge the gap between the still and the moving. Yeah. And in that regard, it is the same. Because each scene
is a composition of...
Right. And it starts with this image, this still.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would be my only gripe with film school. But I loved it. I got a lot out of where I ended up going.
That's awesome.
But and I love following you on Instagram and seeing a lot of the photos of your cats and stuff.
Yeah, there we go. So my education and the 5 figures of student loan debt I finally paid off years ago. So I can take pictures of my cat sitting in and on things.
But I do. I love it. People should definitely check those out. How do you feel about the way that... How do you...
The hashtag because cats.
Yes.
The cat just crashed into something in another room if y'all didn't hear that.
How do you feel about the advance of technology, with Instagram and stuff with photography?
Well, it's a dumb... I like it today. I love Instagram. I loved Instagram before Facebook took it over and figured out how to monetize it and to decide what media I get to see. But like I was telling you when you got here that I've been purging and like trying to just open the flow, just less stuff in my house. And so all this stuff, all this paper, all this analog material. And I even yesterday, two things that went to the trash were a cassette tape and then a mini cassette, a micro cassette. So when I got out of college, I was working for a company in Atlanta that did custom photo printing. It was basically a high-end custom photo lab. Yeah. And then it started to morph into display printing and stuff like that. And I got laid off from them because eventually the photo business was a money sucker. And where we were making our money was in large-scale graphics printing for things like vehicle wraps and these huge ads that you see on the sides of buildings and stuff like that. And as it turns out, the bigger that technology, one person can run a printer that will print an ad the size of a building. You don't need a team of people in darkrooms. So I got laid off because there was just too many people in the company. Yeah. And then when I got laid off, I ended up, I was out of work for a while, got my job, and then the opportunity came up to apply for the job in Texas, and then I ended up here. And when I got out here, all my resources were gone. Like, where do I take film, and who prints photos, and did it all. So I lost all that, and I ended up being in this very, like, I went into mourning for film. And I didn't pick up a camera for a really long time. And there was flip phones, so I had a flip phone, so not my iPhone. And I don't even remember when all of a sudden I just kind of came out of that and I went to the store and I bought my first digital camera. And it was fun. I don't think my first one had an LCD on the back, but when I got the first phone that had an LCD where I could take a picture and then immediately see the result of it, that was interesting and it changed things. And then it was like, now, like all of the darkroom supplies that I just donated to my neighbors who teach at UNT, those tools with which to produce images changed. And I was like, I need a better computer. I need more hard drive space. I might need a scanner. I need all this stuff. I need Photoshop. And so I had to go and start investing in all the materials, these digital tools. And I dabbled in it a bit. I don't know how to use photo. I mean, if I was forced to, I could open a photo in Photoshop and maybe use the stamper tool to clean a blemish off of something. Yeah. But other than that, to me, that's not my thing. My thing is snatching that moment out of midair. So I do apply filters for to change the tone and the color balance and the density and stuff like that. But I very rarely crop, and I'm not about photo manipulation. There's nothing wrong with any of that stuff. It's just, that's just not my thing. My thing is about the documentation. And so with Instagram was my favorite social media because it was very simple. It was simply a linear feed that I controlled, and I could open it up and I would scroll until I ran into the last photo I had seen the last time I opened it. Yeah. And it was this story that was not being manipulated and fed to me. It was a story that I got to control to the degree that I got to choose what appeared in my feed. And that was the perfect thing. And I get it that they got to make money. There's people that this is their job, and you got to make money because they got to be able to pay their rent and buy their groceries and whatever. But it's troubling to me the way that the media is fed to us. But, so I don't know. I may be in the search of another feed that is similar where I can simply share my photos and people can come and look or not look or whatever.
Which I've noticed a lot of more sponsored stuff getting through in my feeds, but, sort of the way that I get around it is the more interesting people that I do follow, I do turn on the notifications for them so that I see when they have something new. Yeah, yeah. So I can, go right to it.
Right, yeah. So
there are workarounds.
There are, right? And so I've got the notifications on a couple of folks. But it's a different way to consume it in the sense that there's several profiles that I will I'll seek out to go find, and I scroll through their linear feed, but then it's not the mix that I used to have. But yeah, it's just different, and if anybody had asked me, I would have told them what I thought, but nobody did, and whatever. But yeah, so it's just, continue to adjust. And some days I don't open it. I was a multi-time-a-day Instagram user, and now I'm a few times a week user now. Take that, Zuckerberg.
You know what? That's probably just with as busy as I've been. I'd probably come down to pretty much the same thing. Mm-hmm. But I end up having to use it for work too more than play lately.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's different.
Yes,
marketing is different, and the notion of hashtag and reach and all that. It's mind numbing.
It's amazing. Like you were just talking about reach. Like I was just at the Fort Worth Stock Show parade yesterday, and I did a live video for work, and just within 24 hours, the video had been viewed like over 1,000, either 1,000 or 5,000. I can't remember which. And I think it was viewed 1,000 times and had like a 10,000 person reach just within 24 hours. And I was just like,
yeah. And that's that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
You want that. How do you get it? Well, and then there's people that do, I guess whatever the version of like search engine optimization. There's that for if you need your business or whatever to come up in a Google search, you can, tweak the odds in your favor by doing search engine optimization, which I only know a tiny, tiny bit about. And then, so I'm sure there's that same kind of thing for Facebook. But then, I have a friend of mine who has her own small business that has been around a lot longer. She's much more, not only intelligent about, like that's her smarts, but she's also more informed. And so she was telling me that on Facebook, that it's almost not worth the money spent on a small business ad because there's so much stuff that comes through sponsored that the big companies are able to pay the money that they need to keep articles in front of viewers. So to me, it's just this baffling game. And I wasn't in the ad game before, so I didn't know, an old school marketing, what was that? I don't know what it was. But, so I don't know the difference now, but it's very obvious to me that this is a game that it's probably a moving target, and it's probably harder than it seems to get people to see it. Like I have 790 friends on Facebook. And I've posted about my app a few times, probably not as much as I'm supposed to. And certainly not as much as many friends I know who post their network marketing ventures, which that's fine. God bless.
Or their babies.
Or their babies. Yeah. So, but out of 790 people, I thought, I was naive to think, well, when I start posting, at least 790 people will see it. Well, that takes out, you have to factor in how many people have hidden me because of my loud and distinct, I'll just say, political views. So that's, maybe half. And then maybe people that added me as a friend, but we weren't really friends. We were just associates. And then they immediately unfollowed me because they're like, I'm just going to, anyway, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe 20 people, maybe 30. I don't know. And I don't, so it's baffling to me how to spread the word about a thing.
And then also who's actively seeing the feed that your particular post would be in at a given time.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it doesn't get filtered down among the other 700 and whatever friends that they may have.
Yeah, it's so baffling to me. But it's not, and the thing that troubles me is the degree of manipulation that Facebook and any of these companies, poor Mark Zuckerberg, let's don't throw him under the bus. Or who cares? But the degree of manipulation and control that the media companies have, that's a little disturbing. But then on the flip side, I recognize that it's just a game. and knowing how to play the game can help you win. And there was an article that I read that had to do with the information and data and posts and who was successful at using all of this during the recent election and who wasn't as successful. And since this is not a political podcast, I'll leave it at that. But there's people that have figured out how to work the system. And so that's a whole other job. And so that's the struggle, is figuring out how to work it to my best advantage.
Yeah, that's pretty much with almost anything that you get into. There's either a system or we'll just say system just to make it easy.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing the ins and outs of trying to navigate that to your advantage,
mm-hmm.
and to put you further ahead than everybody else.
Yeah. Well, see, now that you say that, it's obviously, this has always been the deal.
Yeah.
The systems have just been different. They've just looked different, and the tools have been different.
Yeah.
Yeah, because back in the day, it was about when to rent a video to have the longest amount of time before you had to return it. Stuff like that. I'm old.
I had a question that I was going, and I totally lost it.
Oh, that's funny. It's because you were trying to figure out why would anybody go a place to rent a video?
No, which is funny that we had a Blockbuster, very close to our home growing up, but it was very rare for us to go, and I don't think we even had a membership there. No, we had a big old satellite dish, and when I say big old satellite dish, we had a big old satellite dish, because I think they when they came out. Let me see. We moved into my family's neighborhood. We moved into that house in Fort Worth. I want to say 85, and I want to say it was very late 80s, early 90s. We got a satellite dish. And that thing is still up in my parents' backyard.
I bet. Why would they take it down? But was it the kind that you had to go out and tweak the positioning of it to point it at the sky of the?
You would go to different channels or whatever. And I'm laughing. It sounds so old, but you would see the dish in the backyard moving.
Oh my god, that's
I remember that.
Crazy.
But now my parents have U-verse, and it's just a dish on the house.
That's so
you have
funny.
the signal. It's just a stationary thing, but it's so crazy.
Yeah, that's madness. I mean, yeah, I remember when we had the big. I don't know, it was the big antenna with all the different little spokes coming off of it or whatever you call it. We had those on the roof. Oh, and then we had TVs were the console kind. Did you ever have a console TV where it was a piece of furniture that sat on the ground?
No, at my grandmother's house,
mm-hmm.
Yes, because my grandmother came over from Jamaica in the 70s, I think. Yeah.
Nice.
Pretty sure. And so she still has. I don't know if it still works. It's been years since I've been in that room and checked it out. But yeah, I do remember those television sets. But I remember we actually had, growing up, we had a television. I don't remember the brand, but it actually had the dial that you had to turn.
And one for the
Ultra,
2 for 2 to 12 or 11, and then 13 I think started.
UHF and not VHF. I'm sure my teachers are probably. But yes, I do remember that.
And you had to, and we would just lay in front of the TV so we could change the channel. We would lay on the floor in front of the TV. Ooh, and then we got one that had a remote. This thing was connected by a cord that I want to say was a 20 or 30 foot cord, and there was this giant box that would be the size of an iPad. Now, and it had all these buttons on it, and that's how you change the channel. It had I don't know how many channels, but say it had 20 buttons on it, and then there was a shifter, so then you could have 40 channels.
Wow.
And we would just push button, 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 and change. And that's how when we got that remote, that was very
I
high tech.
remember, funny story, I don't know if I've told this one in the podcast before, but my baby brothers, we had one of those dial televisions, but then my dad ended up buying a television for my younger two brothers. Me and James had a bedroom together, and then the younger two were twins, and they had their own room. Well, then my dad, I think their TV ended up dying, and so my dad ended up getting them a new television. And this one actually came, it was supposed to come with the remote, but it didn't, but I was, very tech savvy child, and I was going through all the settings, and I realized that this one had a sleeper setting. And so I was like, okay, file that information away. There was about a 9-year difference between me and the youngest two. Well, one day, it was one night, the twins were bouncing around being loud. One night my parents had gone to bed, and I kept, being the older brother, I was like, well, Dad said, Dad, I never bothered him, but I was like, well, Dad said that you need to, be quiet, whatever, he's trying to sleep, and they'd quiet down for a little bit, but then they'd get loud or whatever, and they're still running into our room and whatnot. So they were out and about running around. And so I snuck into their room. They had left the TV on. And so I set the sleep timer on it. And another side story was, my brother James, who I shared the room with, his dog had died earlier. Gorgeous Chow. But she was kind of stupid. That's a whole other story. But she had died, and we buried her in the backyard by this tree that was in view of the twins' window. Mm-hmm. And so you need to know that for this part of the story. So my brother, the twins were bouncing around being loud. I'd set the timer to the television, and I told them, hey, if you don't behave yourselves, I was like, well, you need to, Dad says that you need to stay in your room and, and whatever, play in your room. And so they're in there bouncing around on the bed and whatever, being loud, whatever. And I was like, well, if you're big boys, then, you can play in here with the lights off, whatever, and you can watch TV, but if you're not good, then Buffy's gonna come out and she's gonna come through the window. Stupid prank. I know, you see where this is going. And so I went back to my room, I'm timing it on the clock, and I wait till a couple seconds before, and I sneak out of my room, down the hallway to their room, and I'm standing outside their door, and they're bouncing on the bed, being loud, and I hear the TV shut off, and they stop, and I start barking like a dog by their door, and they running out. I think it was probably one of the biggest pranks that I pulled on them. I laughed so hard.
Oh my God, traumatized them for life.
Yeah, but they're fine now. One of them's in the Air Force, so it didn't bother him too much. And the other one's doing computer engineering in college. Cool. So, but
that's hysterical. Oh my God, so smart.
But I want to talk to you about, you initially brought it up earlier that you created an app.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about it.
Okay. It's called Pet Health Diary. It's available on the App Store for iOS right now. Pet Health Diary. It's coming soon for Android. The beta testing just began on Android, so that's really exciting. Cool. Yeah, I've got to get myself an Android device so I can see how it works. It happened because we always had animals growing up. And when I first moved away from my parents and moved out from my grandparents, I ended up with a family cat who we named Bill. And she was a girl, but I don't know, we didn't know she was a girl at the time. And I think she actually had 2 spay surgeries because the vet didn't recognize that the scar she had was a spay scar, so he went to spay her, and she didn't have any of her girl parts. So we always joke that Bill was spayed twice. And then anybody from that time era may be a fan of Bloom County, Bill the cat. So anyway, that's how she got her name. So I got possession of Bill when I moved out from and into my first apartment. And so she was my precious girl. But I didn't have any idea about finances. I had no idea about any of it. I was in school. I was working. I had this, this apartment, this cat, and we were in our 20s. We didn't know what we were doing. We're just getting by. And several occasions, Bill had to go to the vet, and I would always call my mom up and ask for money to take Bill to the vet. And she would give me money. And then one time she finally just cut me off. She was like, nope, if you're going to have a cat, you got to learn to pay for it. So I had to start paying for those vet bills. So in the beginning, I wasn't a great pet owner because I didn't know all the things that it took. I didn't know how to take good care of an animal. I didn't know much about cats just in general. So it was a very laissez-faire situation. So after Bill died, about 6 months later, I got Gordo, who was my sweet old man Tabby, that he was 21 when he finally died. And because if I can talk about my cats, I'm going to tell you about my cats. When I got here to Texas,
Please do.
I know, right? When I moved into this house, this little cat, my Calico that I have currently, she adopted me. And the way that she did it was she set up the sting by climbing on my roof and acting trapped. She wasn't trapped up there, but I was like, all right. So long story short, now she's my cat. And one day when he was having problems with eating and she was throwing up all the time, and I took her to the vet, and the vet said, you got to go to a vet specialist because they can do things. You can do an endoscopy on a cat, where they put the tube down the throat. Yeah. You can do things like that for animals, which is baffling to me. But anyway, so I went to this vet specialist.
You mean professionals, not regular people.
Yeah. No, there's not you can't get a kit on Amazon. If you do, find one. Don't buy it. 0 stars. But yeah, so terrible. No one should endoscopy their own animals unless you happen to actually be a vet. But so I get to the vet, and this is my poor little baby. She's been sick. She's losing weight. She's throwing up all the time, and I'm freaking out. And the vet starts asking me all these questions about the frequency and the kind, and when does it look like, and does it happen when she does this? Does it happen when she does this? And I knew none of these answers. And I wigged out, not only because I'm spending a lot of money at this vet, but also I want to get treatment for my sweet little girl. And I realized I don't know any of these things. And this is kind of my responsibility. As a pet parent, I'm a much more knowledgeable and responsible pet parent than I was in the beginning. But this is part of my responsibility, is to understand and be able to provide information, because the vet only sees the cat or the dog, once a year, ideally, right?
Right.
But I see them all the time. And so all that information about behavior and activity and being able to make connections between, it was right after this happened, or I fed her this food, and that's what, And so being able to put all of that picture together and share that with your vet lets them do better with diagnosing and treating. And because vet visits are expensive, and you don't, especially if it's a high risk thing, you don't want to get it wrong. To me, that just makes good sense. So not only do I want to minimize discomfort, I want my cat to get the best care possible. I want my money to be spent wisely. So I was like, oh, why isn't there an app? Now, of course, by this time I had my iPhone. And so my iPhone I have probably an unnatural relationship with my iPhone, but it's my, I always have it with me. And so I was like, why isn't there an app for that? And so I had this idea of, I'll make this app. So I started designing and planning. And the idea is the app should be to allow somebody to very quickly and easily add a note that is automatically date and time stamped, so that when an event occurs, and it can be any kind of event, it can be, somebody threw up, or my black cat now, she's got this weird thing where she gets this like something's biting her, and she tweaks and twitches and runs around the house. And so how often that occurs is something I want to record. Yeah. And I loathe inefficiency. And so I do not like having to do too many taps or clicks. So I wanted the app that when you launch it, it's right to the diary. You add just one tap to add. And if you've only got one pet, I don't think there's any other taps. You go right into adding this note. And so that people can record, did they, when they gave medicine, if an animal needs specific exercise, they can record how much exercise they're getting. And then it creates this linear feed that is uninterrupted or manipulated by Mark Zuckerberg. Yet. Anyway, but no, but it's this linear feed basically that lets you kind of, it just creates a diary of the incidences that occur of, around, or for, or about your pet. And the idea is that you can then export it and take that information to the vet. They can, if they're using paper charts, they'll just put it on the chart and they'll clip it in with the stuff, or the vet can review it. But then when it comes to those questions, how often, when was the last time, what does it look like, what is the cause of this, or what is the result of this, the owner can answer these questions for their vet, and then ultimately they partner together to provide the best care possible. So that's how it came out, and that's what the intent is.
That is awesome.
Oh, thanks.
I saw your post on Facebook about it. I was like, that is a very great idea. There's a lot of stuff out there for people's animals, but you saw a need and you attacked it. So
thanks. Yeah, there are a lot of apps that are out there on the App Store for this. I don't even know, and because I don't have an Android device, I don't even know. There may be even a ton more that are on for that, but my opinion, none of them are as pretty as mine. Mine's very pretty. I wanted it to be very clean and sleekly designed, very that sort of Scandinavian sort of clean lines kind of thing. So I wanted that. It's orange because that's just an homage to Miss Winnie and her orange patches on her. But so it's very clean, and I feel like it's very efficient in the way that it collects information. And it also, in addition to being the diary, it also provides like a one-stop shop for all of the information that one would need for, it's like most of the apps that are out there now, they catalog the information. So you can download any number that will let you put the breed and the age and the birth date and the spay date and all that stuff, what kind of food they eat. And they're just like this repository of data. So mine's got that, but it also has the diary. And since this process of launching it and understanding it and like getting market research, sometimes I think the new term for it is voice of customer. This is a legitimate thing, right? You got to know what your audience wants. This is how people get kicked off of things like Shark Tank and reality shows. You can have, if your idea may be great, but if there's not a market for it, right, then you've got a nice hobby. So, you know what I mean? So like getting the voice of the customer, and I'm single. So there was a really big miss in the technology in the build that I didn't have because I didn't talk to somebody who had two people in a family. And so, for example, sharing the data so that a family, there's like things like shopping lists and all these things where families can log into the account and then both people on the household can see the same list.
Yeah.
This is the thing I'm missing, and this is the thing that I have in the works for version 2. So these were like all these learning experiences about the balance between trusting my gut, sticking to my guns on the things that were really important to me, and then seeking out information and feedback from others. That, to me, when you can get all those things right, then that's the ideal situation. It's been quite a learning process to figure out how to do that. And it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
As we're wrapping up in time, getting to the end of the podcast, is there anything that you would suggest to somebody thinking about starting an app?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Yeah, let's see. Read your contract. That'd be one thing. If there's my developers have done a very good job, but there was like, one of the original ideas that I had was I wanted the data to be able to be exported to a PDF and then synced with Dropbox. I'm a huge fan of Dropbox. And so I wanted that to be part of the functionality. And in the contract, it said exporting of the data was part of what they were going to build into it, but it wasn't specific as to how that would look. And when they came to me and said, right now we can't do this, I mean, I have to believe them because I have no coding knowledge whatsoever. Also, because I don't think they would just lie. But I realized that my contract didn't specify that specific thing. And so that was a thing that, the thing that the contract said they would do, it does. So the tweaks will, come later. And I would also say that, like, the timeline of it took longer than I wanted it to launch. And so a lot of that came down to me being very consistent and disciplined about following up, asking for clarity on deadlines, specifying deadlines, sticking to deadlines, and things like that. So that for me was about, my to-do list it was not a good product, and I found a new to-do list that functions better with the way I think. And so then it's about, then I applied the discipline of setting a reminder, follow up with so-and-so in 2 days, and then following up when it pops up on my to-do list, actually doing it. So there was a level of discipline that if I had been more disciplined, it might have happened sooner. Also, it's probably going to cost more than you think.
Yeah, digging around, I've been hearing about apps, and I hope to create one myself down the line. But yeah, from what I understand, it's a lot more than you think it would be.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so, and then now the new things that I'm having to learn, it's probably like if we were to do this again in a year or two, which. Thank you so much for asking me to do this. It's a huge honor. But I probably would have a lot of those when it comes to the marketing and stuff. Like, for example, I've printed up a ton of cards that I can now take, and if I go to the vet, I can say, here, set these on your counter for your customers. But we didn't put anything with social media on it. Didn't occur to me to put follow us on Facebook. And I don't know how important that is. I mean, because who knows if anybody's even going to see it on the feed anyway. But just like learning about marketing materials. And I've signed up and I've rented a booth for the Pet Expo that occurs in Dallas on May 20th and 21st.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So now I have to get booth signage. And I have to figure out how to make a trade show booth. So it's like this never-ending set of learning lessons that actually are really very exciting to me. I don't feel overwhelmed or freaked out by them, because one of the lessons that I got from my friend was that, things come in time, and they come in the right time, and you just do one little thing for your business every day, and then it grows. And what appears to me to be a hurdle or an obstruction is really not. And I just keep on swimming.
And then, I guess lastly, what would you suggest for somebody that's wanting to pursue art? Photography? Or
do it. Just do it. Just go and do it. And I don't even know what kind of classes there are, but the structure of classes, the structure that you get in an educational environment can be very helpful. It can be very, in the community that's built around that. Like, one of the biggest things they warned us about when we graduated is it's very hard for somebody to graduate from art school and continue to produce art. And it's not because they're not creative or talented or anything like that. It's just because when you get out of that environment, the discipline that it takes to continue to produce is so much more than the discipline it took to get through school. And so there's a lot of support that occurs in an environment like that. So that would be a thing, is that do it and do it with other people, and go take a class and try new things and experiment with that and explore the notion of self-expression. It's brilliant. Since I've done all this purging, my next thing, and since I got rid of my darkroom supplies, the thing I'm going to do now is that I've got all this material that's just in a box that's like the story of my life.
Yeah.
I'm going to find a way to catalog it. And I guess they call that scrapbooking. But I'm going to find a way to create some things that allow the story to be told in a tangible way, so that's what I'm going to do. It's just for me. And I don't know if anybody will ever look at them, except that a lot of this process will be put on social media. So.
Very cool. Well, I'll definitely probably see it once it gets posted.
I hope so. Thank you.
Well, Gigi, thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Oh, I'm so glad. This was so fun. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Oh.
That's the podcast. Thank you so much for Jenny for sitting down with me, and it was really good catching up with her. You can follow her on Twitter and see the many adventures of her cats at estrogen1193, and that's spelled ESTROJEN1193. Don't forget to download her free Pet Health Diary app or visit her website, pethealthdiary.com. And if you are going to the Dallas Pet Expo, which is May 20th through the 21st of 2017 at Dallas Market Hall, be sure to stop by her booth and say hello. Keep up with the Avert Your Eyes podcast or check out past episodes by visiting our website, avertyoureyespodcast.com. Or check out the show notes to find everything you need to subscribe to the podcast, with links to iTunes, Stitcher, and now TuneIn Radio and Google Play. Follow the podcast on Twitter at AYE_pod_, and on Facebook at Avert Your Eyes, where you can keep the conversation going. And I'd like for you to share a photo of your pet with us and use the hashtag iPod, AYEPOD. Or you can always leave a comment or review, like the one I received from Deborah G via Facebook, where she states how she loved the interview on episode 13 with Danny Gallagher. Thank you so much, Deborah, for your comment and for listening. Another way to help the podcast is to take a very brief listener survey, and the website for that is survey.libsyn, and that's spelled LIBSYN.com. Again, I'll have the links for everything in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Michael Gibson Jr., and you can follow me on Twitter at Nebula_ and the word one, O-N-E, Nebula_ one. Until next time on the Avert Your Eyes podcast, consider yourself warned.